Today on the Christian Nerds Unite podcast, we talk with Ben from Red Panda Publishing about the Adventurer's Guide to the Bible, a new Dungeons & Dragons 5e campaign setting, and we'll get to all of that right after this. Looking for an effective way to connect with unbelievers and introduce them to Jesus? Contagious Disciple Making does just that. And their Philosophy and Strategy of Disciple-Making Movement's live online class is starting very soon. To learn more, go to contagiousdisciplemaking.com/class to pre-register. Learn about Discovery Bible Study, disciple-making movements, the importance of prayer, and building a community that seeks to make disciples from founder Paul Watson and personal coach Rebecca Ewing. Sign up today and let them know that Christian Nerds Unite sent you. And now, back to the show. I am so glad you chose to join us today, and you listening and watching right now are the reason I do this show. I would love for you to give us a review on your favorite podcasting app, whatever app that is, and share this podcast with your friends. That helps the show more than you can ever know. Make sure you stick around for the end of the show because I do have a special announcement. Before we get to our interview with Ben from Red Panda, let's read some scripture. Let's start with Matthew 13, 2-3. Such large crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat in it. While all the people stood on the shore, then he told them many things in parables, saying, a farmer went out to sow his seed. And Matthew 13, 3-35. He told them still another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed into about 60 pounds of flour until it worked through all the dough. Jesus spoke all these things to the crowd in parables. He did not say anything to them without using a parable. So was fulfilled what was spoken through the prophet. I will open my mouth in parables. I will utter things hidden since the creation of the world. Jesus always taught in parables, according to the scriptures. He always used stories to convey deep meaning. These stories helped bring the gospel to life to the people that were listening, to connect it with what they already knew and to ground it in their reality, in the way they were living life right then. And we can use stories today in that same way to communicate the truth of the gospel. Whether that's through short stories or film or sermons or comic books or even collective storytelling like tabletop role-playing games. And Ben at Red Panda Publishing is doing just that with his new Kickstarter that just launched for their new D&D 5e campaign setting and adventure guide called The Adventurer's Guide to the Bible. With over 2 weeks left of the Kickstarter, they've already met and exceeded their goals. So let's get right into our interview with Ben from Red Panda Publishing. Ben, it is so good to have you on the show today.
Thank you for having me on the show today.
Welcome to Christian Nerds Unite. And tell us a little bit about yourself and about your project.
So my name's Ben. I'm from Red Panda Publishing. I am one of the writers, and we currently have a project that is running a campaign on Kickstarter right now called The Adventurer's Guide to the Bible. It is a 5th edition campaign setting and adventure, and it is set in the world of the Bible.
So tell me, what kind of started this process? How did you guys come up with a reason or an idea of wanting to set a D&D adventure in biblical times?
So I think it's just something that naturally comes up when you have a group that is mostly or entirely comprised of Christians who are playing D&D or any kind of role-playing game. It's just something that kind of naturally slips in, whether that's in the form of like you're doing sort of like a Narnia adjacent uh, role-playing uh, role-playing setting, or um, as happened for us, you just start talking about, oh, well, what class or subclass would Moses be or would David be? And you start just for fun, kind of these ideas start trickling into your head about trying to place famous characters from the Bible into their subclasses. And then from there, you start to ask questions like, well, how would you actually run a campaign? And to just take that to the next step, I'm not sure if I'm now over answering your question, but the next step in that process then was, well, let's run a campaign and share some of the stuff that we've learned with other groups. And in talking to other groups who were Christian, so youth groups, Bible studies, we realized, number one, there are a lot of Christian youth groups, Bible studies, youth pastors running games like this already, and everyone is kind of doing the work independently. There's no source, there's no campaign setting that everyone's referring to. It's just everyone's doing their own work. And one of the, I think, the beautiful things about running a campaign out of a module, which some GMs are very opposed to, and that's fine. But one of the things
Yes.
that's great about using a module, and I think everyone would agree with this, even if you hate the idea of a module, is that having all of the information compiled in one place with an appendix that you can refer to just makes your
Hmm.
life easier. When your player asks, what was the name of that, that merchant we talked to 3 years ago in real time, you don't know because you made it up on the spot, right? You don't you don't actually keep track of that stuff. And so the nice thing about the module is that all that information's there and you can refer back to it. So the conclusion of this whole process was saying, well, what if we just compiled all of the characters from one specific time in the Bible into a list of NPCs, significant characters, political drama, and a full setting.
And speaking of, so is it more of a source book, or is it a dedicated campaign that you can play through?
So it is both,
Okay.
which is not an answer to your question because you asked an either or question, and I hate that when is it this or this? Oh, both. The answer is it begins as a campaign setting. So
Okay.
the first, probably it's near 200 pages of content are um, subclasses or advice on how to revise existing
Mm.
race or lineage features, class features, subclass features into the setting of the Bible. Whenever you run a 5e campaign, you have starting material or starting items, your adventuring
Hmm.
supplies. These things are all made for a fantasy setting. So just little advice about how to convert, what does it look like in an actual historical setting in the first century? What kinds of what would adventuring supplies look like? What does politics look like? What does the geography of the land look like? Just general advice on running the setting. The next section after that is called the Adventure Atlas, and it is a full map of the Fertile Crescent with all significant locations mapped out. And then following that, an alphabetical list of every location in the whole campaign or the whole region, with significant characters, references to their stat blocks, and all the little drama and random encounter tables and things like that that you would find in specific areas, all mapped out with references to scripture passages and everything, so that it's all kind of prepared for you. And at that point, if you want to stop, that's fine. If you just want to run your own game using everything that's been prepared, you can. What we've done after that is we've created a kind of plot line that is,
Mm.
it's an original plot line. It's not taken from the Bible. It's our own sort of original adventure, but it is run through a series of major encounters that we've placed into these locations. And when you read about the locations, there is a reference that says, go to run this encounter if they go here. So if you're running your own adventure and you don't like ours, you can simply ignore those and continue on. So it's not so intertwined that you have to run the adventure or not. It's 200 pages of campaign setting followed by another 150 pages that are specific to our adventure.
Okay, very good. Well, I think you started kind of explaining some of this, but to kind of tell me a little bit more, was there a lot of play testing involved? Did you do was there a lot of revisions as you went along? Or is this more of we did this thing and now we've compiled it all?
I think the statement, "We did this thing and compiled it all," is a good summary for what has happened, but it is not. It does not exclude the process of playtesting and revisions along the way, um, which I suppose is a roundabout way of saying both. Yet again, we have done playtesting, we've done balancing, we've had some sensitivity reading, and part of the process, part of our process actually includes Kickstarter. So Kickstarter is a method of what we call crowdfunding. And for those who maybe have never participated in a Kickstarter or have no idea even what Kickstarter is, you probably heard the name because it's just in the air. But Kickstarter is an online platform where you propose an idea, you give everything that you've done so far about the idea as much as you can visually lay it out, and you're basically asking for people to pitch in the funds to be able to bring that idea to life. So in our case, we paid to have quite a bit of illustrations done ahead of time. We've shared as much of what we've prepared ahead of time as we can, and now backers, as they're called, people who back the project or financially support the project, can, using the website, go on and search out our campaign and sign up for reward tiers. And basically what this is that they're giving us money up front to be able to afford to illustrate the rest of the book, set up the printers and produce this book. And then in exchange, they will receive a book at the conclusion of the whole process. The first reason, or the main reason, people do a crowdfunding campaign is to fund. It's to get money to fund the project. And we are doing this to get enough money to fund the project. That's certainly one reason. But the second reason, and this is also really important to us, is that we're creating a community of people online who are interested enough in this project and bringing this project into reality, that we have now a lot of backers. I probably have that number here somewhere.
Looks like you got 572 as of this view.
Okay, yeah. So we have over 500 backers, and these are people who are interested in the project and want this project to work. So we have a very small team of writers, and we had an idea of what this should look like and how encounters should go. But our opinion in the end is kind of that our own opinion isn't as important, and we want this to be a community effort. So we are going to be setting up a Discord server, and we're going to invite the backers of the Kickstarter to take part in a series of playtesting encounters, sensitivity reading, and I guess scriptural analysis to make sure that we haven't made any glaring errors. But in the end, we don't just want it to be our project that we need money for. We want it to be all of our project that we're trying to bring to life.
Okay. Well, and Kickstarter is actually how I came upon your project. Well, technically it was Twitter. It was a Twitter from someone else who mentioned your Kickstarter, and I followed the link, and I was like, okay, this is interesting. The Adventurer's Guide to the Bible, and I want to check it out. And I noticed I've been watching it for, I don't know, the last week or so, and you guys have already surpassed your goal, well surpassed your goal. So this project is definitely happening at this point. What are kind of you said you're going to be setting up a Discord. I know when I've looked at some other Kickstarter programs, Kickstarter projects, it looks like they're basically done. They really are just trying to do a pre-sale as Kickstarter, although they make it sound like they're still working on things. in other projects, it looks like almost nothing is done,
Mhm.
and they're barely getting started, and they need the funds to actually do any of this.
Yes.
Where do you feel like you guys are in this project? I know you've got a little while before you're planning on printing,
Right.
but kind of how far do you feel like this is along? I know you said you're going to set up the Discord, you're going to do some more
Mhm.
play testing and investigation, so that it's more collaborative. But where do you feel like you are in the process right now?
So the module is written. In theory, there would be no more writing to be done. Obviously, that's not true. There's going to be tons of revisions. As soon as you open up something for playtesting on this scale, it's just your whole world gets torn apart. And all because you don't, you're sitting there. It's anyone who's a GM knows what I'm talking about, right? Because I'm not doing anything different than any other GM. You
What
sit
what
in a
it,
dark room by yourself, and you just think this is awesome. This is the
what is
best
the
encounter I've ever written. And
what
then
is the
you
GM line? There's no story that survives
the first
the
encounter with the
the
players
first
or something
encounter of the
yeah.
players. Yes.
But you open it up to your players, and they either find a way to completely avoid the encounter, which is sad in one way, or they go into it and just obliterate all of your playing. It just things don't work out, and this is why we do play testing, but it's just a
Yes.
reality that there's going to be lots of revisions needed. But because of that, and because we knew that, we wanted to go in having everything written, at least thinking that we're done, so that we can have the backers prove to us that we're not done. So the texts are the text of the module is complete. The stat blocks are complete, and as much as they can be complete at this stage. We really mainly were running the Kickstarter to get money for illustrations. We
Mm.
set our goal at $5,500, which um, art is just about half the budget.
Mm.
So by the time we hit the goal, we were looking at $2,000 to $3,000 that we could put towards art. In reality, and I had all this in a spreadsheet before we started, I knew I would be willing to spend up to $14,000 or $15,000 on art, which means we are very close to hitting what I would consider to be the actual goal for what this project could be,
Ah,
creating the thing we actually wanted to create. And there's a difference. The goal, you set a goal for what is the minimum acceptable quality before we print
right.
this, which is usually much lower than you would want. And then you have your actual goal in mind. And generally that's represented through if you look on our page, we have stretch goals. I
Mm.
believe we had 12 in total, and there are only 2 left that have not been unlocked.
Wow.
So yeah, we're very close to unlocking all of our stretch goals. When the last stretch goal is unlocked, that represents that this module is going to be as good as we can possibly envision making it, and there is no more that we can do to make it any better. After this point, to finish answering your question, we're contracting independent artists to do the illustrations from lots of different sources, many that I've worked with in the past. And that process is going to take something like 50 days. Um, According to our official schedule, we said the illustration period was going to be 50 days from the conclusion of the campaign. Because we've been funding so well, I have felt that I can go ahead and start contracting these illustrators. So we
Mm.
already have around 20 of them who are working to illustrate the project already, which
Fantastic.
really getting the amount of support that we have in the amount of time that we have has allowed us in a lot of ways to jump ahead of schedule, because this amount of funding just means, okay, we can be confident that at the conclusion of the campaign, we're going to have money. And so we can go ahead and start commissioning these illustrations. When the illustrations come in, it goes to layouting through InDesign. We lay out the full project, and which it is actually already the text of the module is already laid out in InDesign. It's just waiting for illustrations to come in. But
Mm.
depending on how the illustrations fit in, it'll rearrange things, and then that gets sent to the printer. From there, it takes another 50 to 100 days to get the printer set up and start printing on, just doing our mass production of the module and getting it shipped out to backers, which is the whole second half of the project. We are currently promising fulfillment by August, and that is all I should officially say. But I will unofficially say I would like to get it out sooner.
Oh, that's great. Now I understand there's going to be for those who are thinking about supporting. There's still time to support, and since I'm not sure, we're recording this today, and I'm not sure exactly how long it's going to be until I release this episode. I don't know if I'm going to release it this next week or not, but uh, I know there's still time to support, and
We end
with
on the 5th. February 5th is our last day.
right, and there's a couple of different options. I know there's a digital version and a physical version.
Correct.
So for those who are interested in one or the other, and for the digital stuff, you guys are going to be going through. Is it Drive-Through RPG that you're going to be using?
Yes, we're fulfilling through Drive-Through RPG.
Okay. Now, as far as so now let's get a little bit more. Let's get a little bit away from this project in particular, and just tell me a little bit. How did you get into RPGs? What was your kind of your first adventure into tabletop role playing games?
So this is the question that's going to discredit me as a nerd, because I got into tabletop role-playing games embarrassingly late, such that I would have my nerd card revoked if I told you the answer.
It's quite all right.
But the answer is this. So growing up, I had no awareness that there was such a thing as a tabletop role-playing game at all. I didn't know that it was a thing. Searching back in my memories, the best I could come up with is I could tell you that I knew if a game had the word dungeon in it at all, you weren't supposed to go anywhere near it. That was just a general thing, that because you might accidentally play a game that's bad, and I don't know what that game is, but just no games that have the word dungeon in them. I would say so there were two games that I played a lot as a kid that are not role-playing games, and I'm not making the claim that they are, but I want to share them because this is, I think, part of what brought me into it. So the first game was called Jewels in the Attic. I don't know if you are familiar with this game, but it essentially turns your entire physical home, your house, into a dungeon crawl where you have different encounters and things laid out using cardboard chit tiles that are left around in different rooms in your home. And then by collecting different items along the way, you sort of complete these activities. And the attic, your physical attic, was supposed to be where the dungeon crawl ended, which is why it's called Jewels in the Attic. I thought that was a really awesome idea. And
Nice.
It used a really cool mechanic where you line up little holes in the cardboard tiles to see if something you're trying to do succeeds or fails. So there was no dice, there was no randomizer. It was little hole punches. And I love that idea, but I thought there could be something more. Like there could be actual roles that you take on where different people in your game group could have different abilities to be able to solve the encounters in different ways. And I actually came up with my own rule system that I really wanted everyone to use, but it never really caught on because I was 9. The other game that I really enjoyed playing growing up was called Once Upon a Time, which is billed as a collaborative storytelling game. But once again, I am not making the claim that this is an RPG. I know it's not an RPG. It's just my life. So back off. Once Upon a Time is a collaborative storytelling game where you have cards that have different components of a story, and
Yes.
each player has an ending to the story, like, and then they lived happily ever after, or and then they all died. I don't know, just different endings. And your goal is to guide the story to the ending that you've been dealt. And you do this through playing other cards in your hand that are items like a magic sword, or events like, finding a forbidden forest. And the game plays out by each player taking on what is essentially the role of a GM by narrating the events of the story. So in a way, it's like an RPG if everyone at the table were GMs, and it just took turns GMing, and no one ever took actions as a player. You just narrate the story and the characters up to that point, and then you pass off to a new storyteller who continues the story. And it is a competitive game because everyone's trying to guide the story to their own ending. So there is at the end a winner and losers, which is, I would say, kind of a big no-no in the world of
Yes.
TTRPGs. That's kind of not the point, right? And I would say for that reason, I'm not here to recommend Once Upon a Time, but it is the way I got into it, and it wasn't until until the birth of my daughter that when you have a child, you stop getting sleep, and I bought
Yes.
the
Yes, I agree.
5e starter kit and read it, and then I thought it's basically what I had always been looking for as a kid. It was a way to tell stories using rules.
Mhm.
One of the things that always frustrated me about Once Upon a Time was that my super competitive friends would just, you know, force their way to the ending they wanted without making the story make sense. And I always wish that there were more mechanics that governed what you could and couldn't do in the telling of a story, but there weren't in the game. And when I discovered 5e, I realized you're telling a story, but there's mechanics that make sure that physics is respected and that in some ways the flow of a narrative is respected. And I thought that was awesome. And then from 5e, I discovered Powered by the Apocalypse, and well, just all of them. I think Powered by the Apocalypse is probably my favorite. Um, I also love Alice is Missing. That's another one I think is great. But yeah, 5e was my first actual tabletop role playing game.
Very cool. Well, so between the this is a full blown, murder hobo game, and
Yes.
this is a so much a collaborative storytelling game that we actually never hardly ever roll dice.
Mhm.
Where do you think the Adventurer's Guide to the Bible is going to fall?
Uh, I'm sorry, I was going to make a joke about both, but I'm not going
No,
to.
that's
Um,
perfectly
I
fine.
do I do legitimately think so. The campaign setting, if we were to talk about just the setting itself, is very much would be very much a narrative driven game with probably very little rolling dice because in reality, in history, in the first century, you're dealing with two massive world powers, Rome and Parthia, who are at war with each other. They both, between the two of them, they control pretty much every kingdom on the
Mhm.
map. And so visiting a city like Jerusalem means you have Roman legionnaires just on the ground everywhere. And, Rome and Parthia have their own unique ways of dealing with criminals. And so, in a real, like, gritty, historically accurate approach to playing this module, you probably would want to avoid doing the things that classic adventurers do, like starting bar fights or picking the pockets of a noble, because you would just immediately be killed. Um, Having said that, we are taking with our story, which is we're hoping is sort of clearly separate from the setting. You have the setting, and then you have the story that we've written. We are taking liberties as far as characters that we've invented and events that are happening, which we're doing this to allow players the space. Well, two things: we're allowing players the space to make decisions and do things that you normally get to do in a Dungeons and Dragons style adventure, um, without worrying about stepping on the toes of the biblical narrative. Right. So
Mhm.
we don't want this so tied to the actual story of the Bible that you feel like you need to stick to the script and go, oh, well, I know what happens next. Therefore, we need to just stand by and watch, or we need to wait for Jesus to show up because Jesus is going to show up any minute. That's the kind of thing that's really going to ruin the game for a GM, because they're just going to end up having to have a bunch of NPCs talk to each other, and then they're going to have to try to recall exactly what happens in the story. We wanted to avoid that. And I think there may be temptation among especially religious educators, and there's a note actually in the module about how to use this in religious ed settings. But um, we really advise against using this as a module to just step into a Bible story and live out that Bible story, because that's either going to involve a player uh, casting fireball in the middle of, the Sermon on the Mount, and just doing something horrible that's going to ruin the game for everybody, which you don't want that. Or on the flip side, which is arguably just as bad, you have a bunch of people who are playing a quote unquote role playing game, but they're just sitting there watching the events happen because that's what they're supposed to do. So we wanted this adventure to run parallel, so you see the events of the Bible playing out in the background, but you're still doing your own adventure that requires you to take action and step into the role of heroes. And in our fictional story, there is going to be combat. There are demons that are threatening the world. There is political corruption that needs to be handled. Well, I won't tell you how to handle it because that's up to you as the adventurer. But there is an adventure that requires you to do the classic things that 5e heroes do, from dungeon crawls to open air combat to political intrigue. So it is a bit of both.
Ben and I talked for so long, I needed to make this 2 episodes. So don't forget to join us next week as we continue our conversation. You can find links to the Kickstarter in the show notes. I've already joined in myself, and I hope you will consider joining in as well. Well, that's all I have for you today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, click all the links, whatever links are down there. And you can find all of our social links and links to our YouTube channel at ChristianNerdsUnite.com. And while you're there, click on the support tab. We would love to have you as a Patreon. I do have a special announcement. We have reopened our Christian Nerds Unite merchandise store, now with shirts and mugs. Every week, I'm going to be adding more products. Go to ChristianNerdsUnite.com and click on the shop button at the top of the page and check out all the great merchandise. And if you use the promo code CNU2022 at checkout, you can save 10% this week. Before you go, I do want to leave you with this blessing from John 14:27, the words of Jesus. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid. We'll see you next week. Blessings.